Today, you're all in for a warm-up masterclass. The topic of the day is what should be the price of a lollipop? So really interesting topic. And this is really a chance for you to experience the style of teaching at ESCP. And today will be given the class by our academic director, Professor Vanessa Strauss-Kahn. Hi, Vanessa, how are you?
Hi everyone.
Yes, and she's also a professor of economics at ESCP since 2008. So for those of you who are going to the Paris campus, you will have classes with Vanessa. So it's a really good training for you here to have her masterclass today. And for all of you also going to other campuses, the teaching style is really similar. So it's a really good opportunity for you. So please do participate. This is really your chance to experience that to the fullest. Little introduction of Vanessa first, so you know her a bit better. She received a PhD in economics at NYU and has been a faculty member, well, she was a faculty member at INSEAD from 2001 to 2008. She teaches microeconomics and international trade to the bachelor's, but also to master's and EMBA students. Vanessa worked with various institutions as well on specific missions, institutions such as the World Bank or the United Nations. She does research on economic geography and international trade, focusing on trade liberalization and its impact on firms' performance, global value chains, labor market implication, and trade diversification and development. And recently, she studied financial and political crisis in Africa, and her work has been published in renowned journals such as the Review of Economics and Statistics, the Journal of International Economics, or the European Economic Review. So you are in really good hands with her. She's really an expert. Yeah, some housekeeping rules before we start. As I said, this is really for you. This is an opportunity for you to experience this teaching style at ESCP. So we expect you to participate. And Vanessa will be asking questions during the masterclass. So really do use, you can raise your hands, you know, in Zoom, all of you are really familiar now with Zoom. You can raise your hand to ask your question out loud, or you can also use the chat function if you want to type the answer. So please do. If you have other questions while Vanessa is giving the masterclass, feel free to use the chat as well, and we will pick the questions when we have a minute to go over them. And at the end, we might also have some buffer time to answer questions about the program next year, the academic side of the program specifically. You have our academic director here today, so feel free to ask questions maybe on classes that can be quite interesting. I will be here also to assist Vanessa here and there with the chat, but yeah, I'm going to leave her the floor in a minute. And before we get into the masterclass, we just wanted to know you a bit better. So we have a few polls that I'm going to launch. So first question that we want to know is, in which campuses will you be starting the bachelor adventure at ESCP? So I'm going to launch it. Give you a few seconds to answer. We just want to know where you're going to start, have an idea of who is here today, London, Paris, or Turin, which is your campus. Okay, I see that we have almost everyone is answering. All right, okay, we have a good idea now. So I'm going to share the results. Okay, can you all see it? Yes, so we have slight majority of students who are going to Paris, then London, and then finally maybe the smallest group here is starting in Turin. So really interesting to know. Thank you. Then we also wanted to ask you, so as you know, we have 5 campuses with 5 languages. Which of those languages do you speak? Or maybe if you speak several of them, or maybe which is your mother tongue? So I'm going to launch it here. Choice 5 is for English, I guess, or another language. Okay, I can see things happening. We have a majority still of French speakers, but let's see at the end of this poll what we get. Okay, and the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So as you see, slight majority of French speakers here, but then we have Germans as well, and the choice type, which was kind of English plus other languages, and then also Italian and Spanish speakers. So, okay, really interesting, really international. So that's what you're going to get in class. Get used to it. There are people from different countries speaking different languages. And then finally, is this your first time attending a microeconomics class or masterclass or training? So either yes, I am really curious to know about it, or no, and I can wait to test my knowledge. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll in a second. I think we have enough answers. Thanks for really fast in answering, so that's really, really appreciated. Okay, so for most of you, it's the first time you're going to get a lecture in microeconomics. Really interesting. So really good for you to have an idea of what you can expect in class with Vanessa or with other economics professors in the different campuses. All right, so that's really good for us. We kind of know you a little better now. I'm sure that's going to help Vanessa to know a bit who's in the crowd as well. And without further ado, because I have talked a lot and I'm sure that you can't wait to hear Vanessa's class, I'm going to leave the floor to Vanessa.
Thank you, Sarah. So welcome to everyone, and especially a special welcome from the director of the program. I'm very happy to have you on board. It's a long journey, a nice journey that you'll be starting in September. 3 years journey across different campuses, a lot of exciting moments among yourself, and also, I hope, I'm pretty sure of, in the classroom with your professors. So today, the idea is really to give you a first sense of how the class is going to take place at the ESCP during your program, during the bachelor program. I will show you my way of teaching, and as it was obvious from the pool, some of you will be my students in September, but not all of you. We do not all have exactly the same teaching style, but what we definitely share is the idea that we want our students to participate. We have interactive courses where you learn through the professor, you learn through the theory, but you also learn by yourself and by sharing with other students. Some of us will use some presentation, we'll have some guests, we'll make you have exercises or activities. It all depends, on the course itself, the field, and also the professors, but always participation, making sure that what we teach you is in line with what you see in reality, that it's not too abstract, that it will be practical. All these things are something that all the professors share here at ESCP. Okay, so let's start with this class of microeconomics. This is a little part of the course that you will get in September, basically coming maybe in the second or the third session. Not exactly totally in the same way, because here we are in a master class and it's shorter. So, I extracted some concept. For those of you that already have done microeconomics, well, it won't be new. Microeconomics doesn't change. I mean, if you have the knowledge, you know the concept. But what might be different is that you will not have learned it in our ways. You will not have learned it in a very interactive / business school type of teaching. So maybe you will enjoy seeing it in a different way. And also you will be able to share what you know with other students, because that's also the way we work, meaning that in some topics you might know more than others, you will share with the other, you will help them grow and learn. And in other topics, you will benefit by the knowledge of the other students. So that's always the idea. So let me share my screen with you and we'll start the class per se. All right, do you see the screen well?
Yes, we do, all good.
Perfect, so let's go. So indeed, the title that I put is what should be the price of a lollipop, and then the determinants of demand. So basically the course will be on the determinants of demand, and we'll use lollipop as an example. So why lollipop? For some reason, I started to use this example in my class, and you'll experience it with me in September, most probably, because it works well, but that could be any good. Okay, here we are talking about the price of goods and especially the determinant of demand for that good. So just to start with, let me introduce microeconomics basically and how it starts. In most textbooks or in most classes that you'll get from professors, you will see a graph like, okay, just a second. Okay, you will be given a graph like this. So this is price, this is quantity, and you will be given this as being the demand side, and then you have the supply side. Okay, and so your professors, they show you this graph, or you read it in the book, and then they tell you, well, when those two curves meet, we have what we call the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. And what is this graph useful? Because, well, starting from demand, and starting from understanding this graph, we'll be able to see what happens if something changes in the economy. For example, if there is a change in demand, if there is more demand in the economy, maybe more demand for lollipops, okay, there are more kids, or there has been a very good advertising for lollipops, and people want to eat more lollipops, that will mean the demand increase, and therefore will shift the demand curve that way. And then you reach a new equilibrium. Okay, these things are going to be things that we learn in class. But what I want to tell you is that this graph, supply and demand, and the fact that we converge to the equilibrium, in most cases, in most courses, they just be given to you. And then, well, you will agree with it because your professor told you that was the way, and you know, hopefully you believe your professor is right and you're learning from your professor. So you get this graph and you say, okay, demand look like this, supply look like this, and that's the equilibrium. Well, that's not exactly the way I do it in my class. What I do, of course, I get to that, but what I want is, I want you not only to trust me, I want you to be convinced that demand looks that way, supply looks that way, and that when you have a market, price and quantity converge to this point, which we say is the equilibrium. So how do I do that? Well, in the first class, or maybe the second class that we have, I simulate a game within the classroom, meaning that half of the people in the classroom, half of you will be buyers and half of you will be sellers. And then we simulate a market, and we make this market run, and the market runs for several rounds. So we do that for about like 30 minutes. We have this market running with people dealing, meaning selling and buying lollipops. And what you will observe is that as the market runs, the price and quantity are converging toward this equilibrium. So what you see in the classroom is that this graph that represents a market actually represents something that is the reality, in the sense that we can reproduce this market very easily within a classroom. So usually by the end of this class, you're pretty much convinced that, okay, supply should look like this, demand should look like this, and the market works. That leads us to the next step, which is, okay, now that we have understood the market and so on, we have understood that there is a demand and there is a supply, let's get a bit deeper into demand. Let's understand better what makes this demand look downward sloping and what is it made of. And that's where we get to the second step. For some reason it's not working. Maybe I have to. Okay, not sure why. Check. Okay. All right, was slow. Okay, I should erase first because otherwise I will carry this with me, and we don't want to have the graphs with us all the time. Okay, so let's take it off. Shouldn't have to do that, but something is not clear. I'm not clear why. Okay. All right. So once we have understood that we talk about supply and demand, we get more toward the firm itself. And in order to study demand, we first wonder, why should we consider demand? Well, we should consider demand because the objective of the course itself, the objective of microeconomics, is to find what are the optimal decision process for the firm, and in order for the firms to maximize its profit. So I guess we will all agree that the profit of the firm is revenue minus cost. That's pretty straightforward. So then, the first class, as and that is linked with what we do today, is to look at the revenue side. And then later on, we'll study the cost. And then following up, we'll study the different situation in which the firms could be producing, meaning whether the firm is in a very competitive market, or if the firm is a monopoly, or if the firm is just competing with another firm like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. We call it an oligopoly. There are only really two firms that are sharing the market. But well, before putting the firm in a different type of market structure and before studying cost, we want to study the revenue part of profit. And the revenue part of profit is made of price and quantity. Your revenue is how much, at which price do you sell the good, and how many quantity of that good you sell. So what's the price of the lollipop and how many lollipop do you sell? And to understand how many lollipop will you sell and at which price, that's the demand side of the market. So the first step that we have is to understand the demand. So we are gonna just move on to that. But let me first ask you a question. I just said, well, microeconomics will look at those firms that want to maximize profit. Is it the goal of all firms to maximize profit? What do you think? Do you think all firms' goal is to maximize profit? Don't be shy, the idea is to participate and also, try your way, because maybe you have a good answer and maybe you don't, but if you don't, it's okay. It's, discussing and sharing and so on. Finn, I see you raised your hand, so yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's also like non-profit organizations, so that's not their main objective.
Correct.
Because we want to do good in the world, so that's their main focus.
Okay, correct. So non-profit organization may not have as a goal to maximize profit. State-owned company may not have as a goal to maximize profit. Sometimes they want to maximize the number of employees, of workers. Sometimes they want to minimize pollution. Okay, so you may have very specific objectives that may be different from maximizing profit. Now, I have seen in the chat that some of you said the majority of them. Yes, it is true. The majority of private company will have as a goal to maximize profit. So in microeconomics, we could actually study those firms which goal is not to maximize profit, to have other objectives than maximizing profit. But with the time that we have, and with the time that we have, in your first year of bachelor, we'll focus on those firms which goal is to maximize profit. Okay, so that's why we very focus on this specific type of firms, private firms that wants to maximize profit. Of course, many of them will have profit as a goal, but not all of them. Okay, let's move on. Yes. All right, so as we said, profit is made of revenue and cost. Revenue is made of demand. So now we want to understand better the demand side of the economy. So the first question that we want to ask is, what are those factors that affect demand? So if you think of demand for lollipop, but it could be for any good, what are those factors that you will want to look at? What will have an impact on demand? So here I'm asking you the question, so give it a try. What do you think will affect demand? What will be, those variables, those elements in the economy that will have an impact on demand? So Lucas, for example.
So it could be things like a change in the tastes and preferences of consumers.
Okay, let me write it. Okay, I write change by making a, okay, hold on, yes, here. Change is usually shown in economics with a triangle like this. So change in preferences, that's one of the things that you say. Preferences. Okay, not very well written, but the idea is there. Any other idea, Rafael?
It can also be impacted by marketing campaigns.
Okay, marketing. Yeah. What else? Roxanne?
Complementary goods.
Okay, so here I agree with you. So I'll write first other goods, and here complementary. What is a complementary good?
It's like a good that can replace it. Or like goes together, like a tennis racket and a tennis ball.
Okay, good idea. Complementary good. Okay. Goods that are complementary, meaning that they have to be used together. So your example was a good one, or a racquetball and the ball itself, coffee and sugar, gas and car. You know, there are many, many complementary goods. And it's true that, you know, other goods may have an impact. You know, the availability of other goods may have an impact on the demand for your good. If goods are not complementary, do you know how we say that they are? They may not be related at all, but if they are related to goods, they may be complementary, or they may be, any idea from any of you? Probably people that have done microeconomics before, but that's okay. You know, two goods could be complementary, or they could be, Finn, maybe?
Substitutes?
Substitutes. So can you explain what are substitutes good?
Yeah, so for example, Pepsi and Coca-Cola, so you can like switch them for one another.
Exactly. Okay, so substitutes good is good that you can switch one from the other. Okay, you consume one or the other. They are quite similar, usually similar goods. Substitutes good. Okay, so you're right. Other goods will have an impact. The availability of other good, or even if we want to be more precise, the price of other good will have an impact on your demand for that specific good. What else? Any other ideas about what could have an impact on the demand for your good? Gali?
Yeah, so for example, in a more geopolitical context, the situation of a country and the situation of a neighbor country on the supply of a good is like kind of affecting the demand as well. I'm thinking of the current example of Russia and Ukraine, in which Ukraine have been forced to cut communication with Russia, and also cut some supply chains of some sorts.
So let me answer to that. Supply, I mean, you said the supply of the good may have an impact on the demand. The supply of the good, then, you know, we are on the supply side. If we are talking about a specific market and we talk about the supply here, you know, if there is less of the good, I will change the supply. It will not change the demand. The demand is really how much you demand the good. But now where I agree with you is that you said the supply in a geopolitical context, meaning that if some countries, for example, stop the supply of certain of the good, this may have an impact on the demand on another market. Okay, so this is true that if something happened in the general, in one market, it may have an impact on the other market. Okay, on the demand in the other market. I agree with that. What else? Because I'm thinking of something that is quite actually important and that hasn't been mentioned yet. So David, maybe?
Overall market timing.
Okay, the timing. Yes. What do you have in mind?
Well, I mean, of course, there are complementary goods, but there are also like complementary industries. And sometimes one industry is way ahead of the other industries. And this affects like the overall demand for the good. Because if one industry pushes ahead and, for example, brings a product on the market, but like the overall market is just not ready for the product, and then there will be less demand for the product.
Yeah, but that's, you know, it's not here, it's not really the industry. The industry is a supply, right? I mean, we'll make the difference very carefully when we get into the classroom. But here, what you're talking really is about the supply, you know, the product comes first and another product comes second or whatever. This is supply. The demand, you know, is made of things that we are trying to list. But, you know, maybe, I mean, I agree with you that maybe it could be linked with whether there are other substitutable goods. You know, is the industry the first one? That will mean that there is less substitutable goods, for example. Okay, so I will put it in there. Now, when you say timing, I was thinking of something maybe different. For example, certain goods, they have seasonality. Okay, so let's talk about umbrellas. Okay, the demand for umbrellas is usually higher in the fall or the winter than it is in the summer. Okay, so timing might matter on that ground. Okay, but one more thing. So Jacob, maybe?
I think obviously the price of my product.
Okay, thank you. The price of the good. This is the most obvious, but very often we don't think of the most obvious because, well, it looks obvious, so we don't think of it. But, well, what will matter a lot for the consumers on how much they want the good? Well, the price of the good. Okay? So let's stop here. What do we, I'm thinking of something else. What else could be very important that you haven't said that will have an impact on demand? You know, how much do you want, do you demand of lollipops? It depends on the price of the lollipop. It might depend on the price of, let's say, substitutes good. Let's say the price of other type of candies. You know, if the other candies are very expensive, that means you will rather buy lollipops than buying other candies. Marketing, well, marketing and preferences, I'll put it together because actually, well, your preference are changing through marketing campaigns, for example. The context, the geopolitical context and timing, you know, all this as well. All this, you know, I'll put this together because this has to do with preferences basically and with taste. You taste for the good, your preferences for the good, they depend on many things. Then there are the price of other goods and the price of the good. But I'm thinking of something else. Do you have another idea? Maybe I'm not going to say your name very well. Vid or Vide? How should I say your name?
Vide, hard Scandinavian name.
Yeah,
well, expectations of the price of the good.
Yes, you're right. Expectation could matter. You know how much you demand today because you know that the price might change in the future. That's correct. I will put it
That's
with.
Not what you're looking for.
Yeah, expectation. So I'll put it with the price of the good and expectation of changes. But what else? You know, think of yourself when you decide how much to buy of something. What matters as well for you?
Okay, I have another one, like your own financial situation.
Exactly, your own financial situation, how much money you actually have. We'll put it under the income bracket, okay? So now I basically have a big picture of what are the main important variables for demand. I isolate, so let me see if I can move on to the next slide without erasing and so, but I'm not sure I can, which is a problem. Oh, yes, then it's still there. Okay, let me keep it on the top because otherwise we'll use too much time, although it's very messy, but okay, it's okay for today because it's a master class and not a real class. I'll never do that in a real class. Anyway, okay, so you mentioned it, those things, the own price of the good, the price of other goods, which could be complementary goods or substitutes good, the income, and then I'll put everything else in the taste category because taste includes, well, your own preferences that might change because of advertising, that might change because of the geopolitical situation, it might change because of the timing of the year, depending on which months we are and so on. It might change, well, you know, and so on and so forth because of policies and so on. So I will put aside the own price, the price of other goods and income. And I will also do that because those first three variables, we are able to link the variables with the way the demand is going to change. So let me explain here. What I mean by that is that if we think of the own price, we'll be able to say what happens if the own price increase, what will happen to the demand? Same thing with the price of other goods. If the price of other goods changes, how will it happen? How will it affect my demand? Same thing with income. But if we talk about all the other variables, it's not that clear because this has to do, you know, with more general, I mean, there is no rules, you know, it depends. So let's get into that actually, and let's try to understand what are the direction in which those variables actually affect demand. So let's start with the own price of the good. So if the price of the good increases, what happened to the demand? So I'm asking you, what do you think? If the price of the good increases, what happened to demand? This is not a very tricky question. What do you think? Tobias, yes, what do you think?
Yeah, the demand will decrease, obviously,
Okay,
in my opinion.
The demand will decrease, which makes a lot of sense. So when the price of the good increases, the demand decreases. You know, if the price is higher, you want less of the good, and also with higher price, less people can afford it. So, you know, that means less demand. Is this always true? So is this always true? Can you think of situation or specific goods for which you will say, no, I don't believe it. I don't think it's true. So I got from Yanis or from Nico and Osana in the chat box, not for luxury good. So is that true? Is that true that for luxury good, when the price increases, and also I got for petrol, so I'll talk about that as well. But for luxury good, I read, this is not necessarily true. So do we think it's true? Well, again, what I'm talking about is the idea that if the price increases, we'll have an increase in demand. So that will mean demand looks like this. The higher the price, the more you want of the good. Well, I will not say it's true for luxury good, you know, because luxury, you know, think of it, a Chanel bag. Okay, a Chanel bag is a luxury good. Agree? Yeah. If the price of Chanel bag is increasing, are you going to buy more or less of it? More or less of the good. If the price of Chanel bag increasing, do you buy more or less of it? Less. You will probably stop buying Chanel bags and you'll move to buy Prada or whatever. Okay, so although it's a luxury good, it's not true that we see this feature. It's not true that we see this feature that the higher the price, the more you want it. Okay, I see in the chat again, somebody mentioned Veblen goods. So would you want to explain what that is?
Well, from what I got is the type of luxury good for which when the demand increases, obviously, the demand increases when the price increases. Well, I guess it's like a type of like luxury goods, but I guess I don't know, like an example would be like a very like luxurious like car where like people want it just because it's like super expensive. That's like, I guess, the example I would use for like a Veblen good.
Okay, so that's exactly the idea. It's very often called Veblen good in textbook. I like to call them show-off goods. So why? Because basically they are indeed usually luxury good, but it's not for all luxury good. They are luxury good that actually the more expensive they are, the more you want to have them. So why would you want to have something that is, the more expensive it is, the more you want to have it? Well, to show that you're rich. Basically, that's what, you know, it's to show off, basically. So it could be indeed like a race car, for example, or it could be sometime an apartment. Okay, so you want to buy the most expensive apartment because that shows to everyone that you are actually very rich and wealthy. Okay, so show off goods. They exist. Why am I mentioning them? I'm mentioning them because it occurred once in a while in few markets that we observe this happening. And we have to understand where it comes from. Okay, so it comes from those show-off goods. And there is another situations where it happens. There are two situations. They are rare at the end. I mean, it's really not for all good. It's for two very specific cases. One case is those show-off goods where you want to show to others that are wealthy. So the more expensive, the better. And the other one is called giffen good. Have you heard of giffen good before? Maybe some of you? Okay, so let me explain what is a giffen good. A giffen good came after a lord, a British lord called Sir Giffen. Okay, and so what he realized is that it was during very tough time in Ireland in the 18th century. People were dying of starvation because there was not enough food. The situation was really bad. And what they observed is that the price of potato was increasing. And while the price of potato was increasing, the demand for potatoes was increasing as well. Okay, so we had this feature that the higher the price of potatoes, the more demand for potatoes. And definitely with potatoes, we're not talking about show of goods, right? So this is not this case. So what is happening? What is happening? How is it possible that for potatoes in Ireland, in those very difficult times, you at the same time have an increase in the price of potatoes and an increase in the demand for potatoes? So Lion, I don't know if I'm correctly saying your name. Sounds great, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that works. I'd say whenever there's yeah, just a necessity for a good. So for example, I think to a certain degree we have the same thing at the moment with petrol prices. So the prices are increasing, but at the same time the demand is also like in relation to the supply is also like rising.
Yeah, but what you say there
that-
is in relation with the supply. So maybe here it's not
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
demand
yeah.
side effect. You see, it might be because there is less supply. So yes, the price increases and so on. But okay, here we're really on the demand side.
Yeah.
So what could it be on the demand side?
So probably just the necessity, like they needed the potatoes to have something to eat, basically.
Okay, so yeah, the background is there. What do we need to have this, to have those given good, those very specific situations where the price of potato increase and the demand for potato increase as well? What we need to have is that we also are in a very bad situation. That's what I mentioned before. The country was not going well, which means what? Which means that there were high inflation, all the goods price were increasing. So if all the goods price were increasing, that means for consumers, the purchasing power was decreasing. You know, how much money they can spend on goods, how much they can buy is lower than usual because all the prices have increased. So what do you do if that's the case, you know, and you have a low income? You have a low income, the price of all goods increase, your purchasing power is lower. So then what do you do? Well, maybe you decide to eat less meat, which is more expensive, and to eat more potatoes, which are the less expensive among those goods that have a higher price. Okay, and in that case, we may observe on those goods that are the cheapest that while the price of those goods increase, the demand for those goods increase as well. Okay, so those given goods are more complicated, but basically given goods and show of goods, there are the only two situations where we may observe this, meaning the price is up and the demand for the good is up. But in most cases, and you were perfectly right to say it before, in most cases, the demand curve look like this, meaning when the price rises, the demand decreases, okay? And that's called the law of demand because that's for most situations, most goods. Okay, what about the price of other goods? So what about the price of other goods? If the price of other goods changes, how does it affect the demand for my good? So that's basically the question. So let's see, okay? Okay, so we have to distinguish the two types of good. Either they are complements or substitute. Okay. So let's imagine the price of other good, which is a complement, increases. What does that mean for the price of the quantity of that good? So if the price of this other good increases, the quantity demanded of that good will, normally, it will, Marilia, what will the quantity of that good do?
It would increase as well.
I'm first talking, you're right, ultimately, but here I'm talking about, okay, the price of good ore, let's call it a I don't know, water. Let's call it soda. Okay, the price of soda increases. What happened to the quantity of sodas?
No, it would decrease.
Well, this one will decrease. Now I'm talking about a good that would be complementary with soda. Let's call it pizza. Okay, I like to have pizza with soda. Okay, let's say that for me they are complementary. So now I'm talking about the quantity of the other good. Let's call it pizza. Okay, so if the quantity demanded of soda decreases, what will happen to the quantity of pizza? Marilia, if you want to continue.
Oh, sorry, it would also decrease.
It will also decrease, correct. Okay, so here we see that if the price of the complementary good increases, what will happen to the demand for my good? It will decrease as well. Now, if the goods are substitutes, so now let's call it again Coca, okay? If the price of Coke increase, we know that the quantity of Coke will decrease. But now let me ask about the quality of a complementary substitutes good, and let's have this substitutes good being called Pepsi, okay? So what will happen to the quantity of Pepsi then? So anyone? I don't know, like Nicolas or Nicola? So what?
Nicolas, it will increase.
It will increase, yes, because you know there are substitutes. So if you demand less Coke here, you will demand more Pepsi. Okay, so here we see that when the goods are substitutes, when the price of the substitute good increase, then the demand for my good will actually increase as well. Okay, and those rules, they are always true. Agree with me? Yeah, okay. Now let's take of this for income. So what happened when income increase? When income increase, what happened of your demand for the good? So Raphael, maybe, what happened to the demand of the good when income increase?
Well, the demand increases as well.
Okay, correct. The demand increases as well. You know, you're richer, so you will ask for more goods. That's true. Is it always true? Do you know, Raphael, of cases that where it will not be the case?
Well, you might change to another good if there is goods who are focused on more luxurious customers, for example, which is a very specific situation I could imagine right now.
Okay, correct. So we will actually call this case when the income increase, the quantity decrease. It occurs, we observe that, and this is called inferior goods. When we observe that, we say that the goods are goods that are inferior goods. Example of inferior good, okay, you're students, so probably your income is not that high. What do you buy? You buy pasta, lots of dry pasta, right? I mean, you eating lots of dry pasta because they are cheap, they are easy to do and so on. Then a few years from now, you've done your study, you get a job, you have a good salary. What are you going to do? Your income is increasing. Do you think you increase or decrease your consumption of dry pasta? Well, Lion?
I'm going to decrease because I'm going to buy superior goods. So I'm going to substitute what I was buying before for something of higher quality. And therefore, my demand will probably not change, but that's the quality level.
Oh, it might change. I mean, it will decrease. Yeah. Probably you will eat less dry pasta and more steaks, vegetables, sushis, and stuff like this. Okay, so then we call it inferior goods. Yeah. So now, you know, are there Italian here? I'm sure there are some Italian. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that, you know, your income increasing, you eat less dry pasta? Any answers here? I don't see the chat.
As an Italian, I will continue to eat pasta. Honestly.
Exactly. As an Italian, I think you will continue to eat pasta. So when we say that, you know, a good might be inferior in some market, but not in other markets. Meaning, you know, a good is not inferior per definition. We cannot say dry pasta is inferior good. We cannot say that. We could say like maybe in France, dry pasta will be an inferior good, but in Italy it will not be. Okay, so this is a concept that has to be taken with being careful when you think of it, because it depends on the market. Okay, but any situation where you see an increase in income leading to a decrease in demand, that's an inferior good. Okay, so now what we did so far is that we characterize the different determinant of demand. And okay, taste, you know, and by taste, I mean anything else that I cannot really give a relationship between change in the price and the change and the direction of the change in the demand. Okay, so that's why I put it all together. There are many other variables that have an impact on demand. But at least always when you think of demand, you have to think of the price of the good, the price of other goods, substitutes or complements, and the income, and to think how they will affect demand. All right, so the next slides, and that's usually what I do in my classes, is that we build together some understanding, we share examples, we talk. Here, I don't see many of you, so I'm very much grabbing on those of you that are willing to participate in a classroom. I will try to engage a bit more people because I see you directly. But then once we have put together all those concepts, usually you will have slides like this that summarizes everything we just said. Like this, you have it on the slide. So what did we say? We say the demand is determined by the price of related goods, which could be substitutes or complement. And here again, we have a definition of what is a substitutes good, what is a complementary good or a complementary good, and then we see the direction by which it will change the demand. So the own price, that will be the law of demand, an increase in the price leads to decrease in the quantity in most cases, not all of them, because we have seen, you know, those show-off goods, those given goods, but there are very few situations where they exist. So up to now in microeconomics, we'll always take into account the law of demand. Increase in price leads to lower demand. Then the price of other goods, depending on whether they're substitutes or complement. If there are substitutes, for example, the price of Mercedes cars will have an impact. An increase in the price of Mercedes cars will lead to an increase in the demand for BMW cars or complementary good. An increase in the price of gasoline will lead to a decrease in the demand for car. Okay, and what we did before showed that very clearly. Now with income, well, goods could be normal goods. So for example, the demand for cars in the Balkans will increase as per capita GDP increases. So that's a normal good. Or if we talk about inferior good, the increase in per capita GDP will decrease the demand for cheap food. Okay, so this is a summary. Taste could go any different ways. And then we have, again, saying the same thing, but in the form of a table, all those different situations that tells us about those different determinants of demand. Okay, now that we know that, we can draw this demand curve. Okay, what do we have here? We have the demand for lollipops, it's here, and it's downward sloping. It's downward sloping because, well, lollipop is not a show-off good, it's not a given good. So this relationship between the price of lollipop and the demand for lollipop is negative, meaning, well, the higher the price, the lower the demand, or say differently, the lower the price, the more demand for lollipops. Okay. Now let me ask you, we have this drawn, this demand curve. This is a demand curve. Now, what happens if the income goes up? You know, what happens if income goes up? So you have more income. What will happen to the demand for lollipops? Okay, Federico.
Well, if the income increases, then your purchasing power increases too. So you will be pushed to buy more lollipops. But okay. I think even that maybe people would have, like the people that want to save money, maybe wouldn't increase their demand for lollipop, but keeping it the same because they want to save money.
Okay, so it depends, of course, of the people, but here we are looking at it more generally for the market. And altogether for the market, there are people that will not change it too much because maybe they don't like so much lollipops and they want to use their extra revenue for something else. But some people will actually use this revenue to increase the demand for lollipops. So ultimately, the demand will move up. What does it mean that the demand moves up? Basically, it's a shift of the demand curve to the right. Okay, why? Because basically, let's say the price of lollipop is 15. Okay, so let's say we have a price of lollipop at 15 here. Before the increase in income, when the price was 15, there were 40,000 lollipops being sold. Okay, now that the price at the same price, now that there is more income in the economy, so people are richer, at the same price, they will ask for more. So you will be able to sell more lollipops. And that's true at any level of price. So for any price, it will be true that people will want to buy more of it. And that's why it resembles a shift of the demand to the right. Okay. Now, just asking here, what happened if, let me go back a little bit. Okay, what happened if actually there is no change in income, so I'm here, but for some reason, the price of lollipop decreases. What will happen to demand? it's not tricky question. We have answered that already, but I'm just asking it in a different way. So if the price of lollipop goes from 15 to 10, what happened to demand? Aimé?
It will also increase.
Yeah, demand will also increase, but here it will be what we call a movement along the demand curve, meaning it's not a shift. It's not like at any price we have an increase in demand. It's like we change the price and therefore the demand increases. Okay, so we have to distinguish these two concepts. Movement along the demand curve. When the price changes, you move along the demand curve like this, or shift in the demand curve. So the demand curve shift left or right. And when it shifts left or right, it has to do with other variable like income or other goods or something that happened in the economy, but not with the price of the good itself. Okay, so that's what we have here, and therefore we know now how to draw the demand curve, and from this demand curve to see what happens if there are some changes in the economy. Okay, so now let's see if we ask questions that are related to what we just saw. So what if the producer lower the price of its lollipop? Well, that's basically the question I just asked, to 0.1. Do you need to draw a new demand curve? So do you need to draw a new demand curve when there is a change in price of the good itself? So Tobias?
No.
No,
There's
why?
no need to draw a new demand curve because it's the price of the lollipop itself, and it's no variable.
Perfect. So it's the price of the lollipop itself that decreases. So it's a movement along the demand curve. So there is no need to draw a new demand curve. What if the producer increased advertising? What will happen to the demand relationship? So now we are not talking, we are talking about another event in the economy, more advertising for lollipop. So what do you think, Marilia?
Well, it's a non-price determinant, so it would be a shift in the curve.
Okay, which way?
Demand, rightwards.
A rightward, okay? So correct. Here we have more advertising. More advertising, it's like changing income. It's same, I mean, it's not the same thing, but it has the same effect on demand. More people want the good at the same price. Why? Because they've been convinced by the advertising campaign that it was a good idea to actually buy this good. So for any price, there'll be more demand. So it's like a shift in the demand curve to the right. Okay, last one. If Haribo candies, producers, so that's another kind of candies, reduces its price, what will happen to the demand relationship? So what do you think? So anybody else? I mean, I'm happy to ask again Tobias, Lion, or Marilia, but anybody else wants to give it a try? So what happened to Haribo's? Carlota, maybe? What happened to the demand relationship of lollipop when the price of Haribo's decreases?
I think the demand relationship would then increase.
So I think you're right, but I'm gonna check because myself, I always need to do the different steps. So I have the price of Haribo candies that decreases. What does it tell me about the quality of Haribo's?
The quality either decreased.
The quality of Haribo's. If the price of candies, let's call it just candies Haribo, if the price decrease, what will happen to the quantity?
The quantity would then increase.
The quantity of Haribo's will increase. So now I'm wondering, my lollipop, okay, there are, what are lollipops to candies? They are what kind of goods? What's the relationship? What is gone?
There's some type of sweets or something.
There are two different types of sweets. So if I were to compare them, what kind, how are they related? We saw before that there are two ways to relate goods when they are related. So they could be complement or substitute. So would you say that they are substitutes or complement?
I would say they are complement more, just they're kind of the sweets, but they're not exactly the same thing.
Okay, so the first, when you say they are kind of sweet, but not exactly the same thing, what you intend is that they are substitutable. You can get either one or the other. There are two types of different sweets. But I understand that you wonder, because sometimes, you know, especially when you're kids, the more candies, the better. So you could think that they are complements. So, you know, even there, you know, always we have to ask the question, what kind of good are we talking about? Does it make sense? And so on and so forth. Well, in that case, I will think more than they are substitutes. If you buy candies, you will buy less lollipop. And if you buy lollipops, you will buy less candies. So here, if there are substitutes, if you buy more, you know, I just said it, but if you buy more candies, what will happen for the demand for lollipop? You buy more candies, what will happen to the demand for lollipop?
It will increase.
It increases if you want to have them both together. Do you want to have them both together?
No.
Yeah,
So
I think you want one or the other, right? So if you buy more candies, you will probably decrease your consumption of lollipop. Okay.
Yeah.
Will it be a shift of the demand curve, or will it be moving along the demand curve? Any idea? So here it will be a shift. It's a shift because it does not affect directly the price of lollipop. The price of lollipop, the relationship between the price and the quantity of lollipop, the demand curve, doesn't change. What changes is that the price of the other good, the price of candies, changed. Okay, so that's a shift. I'm going quickly. Okay, we're in a master class, so I'm going quickly on all those concepts. When we do it in class, we use more examples. You have the time to ask again, and so on and so forth. But that's basically what we do. Okay. Okay, so here I just wanna, and that will be the last concept for today's class. I just want to talk a little bit about this, which is called the elasticity of demand. So have you heard, have you heard of elasticity before? Yes, no, you can respond in the chat. Have you heard of elasticity? Elasticity of a good before? Yes, Elena, Federico, Emiliano. Okay, so it depends, very much so, and that makes sense. I guess those of you that have done some economics, microeconomics, you've heard about elasticities, but if you did not, you know, makes sense. I mean, it's not somebody that that's something that you learn in other places than business or marketing. Okay, so sometimes finance. So basically in business school, when you do business studies, so if you haven't done business study or economics, you will not know about elasticities. But elasticity is very important. It's a very important concept for us in economics, but as well, you know, as I just mentioned, in marketing or in finance. Why? Because basically it will measure the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. So basically it will measure how much demand changes when you change the price, okay? And that's quite important. And as Yanis said, sometimes it will tell you whether demand is elastic or inelastic. So let me explain better what I mean by that. So the elasticity, so here I put an E, but because I could not write it in a better way, but usually we use to represent it, we use the epsilon like this for elasticity. So the elasticity is the percentage change in quantity over the percentage change in price. So basically, it tells you when you have, for example, a percentage change. So as I said before, change, we often use this triangle. When a percentage change in price, you have a change in price. Let's say you have an increase in price of 10%, okay? And we want to have an idea of what will be the percentage change in quantity caused by this change in price, and that will be the elasticity. So which direction should it be? Which direction should the quantity change if we have an increase in price by 10%? So Yanis, you were talking about elastic, inelastic. So if you see a change in price by 10%, what should you expect of the change in quantity? Which way should it be? Up or down? Okay, Yanis, you're with us? Okay, so let's ask Tobias. So which way should it be? Which way should the demand changes?
Yeah, down. It will
down.
decrease.
Okay, correct. The law of demand. If the price increases, the demand should go down. Okay, this we know for sure. but then by how much? So the elasticity tells you more. The demand curve, it tells you when the price changes, the quantity, when the price goes up, the quantity goes down. That's what we learn from the demand curve. But from the elasticity, we learn the magnitude, the relative proportion of the change, the responsiveness of demand to change in price. So, for example, we could say that when the price increased by 10%, the demand decreased by, let's say, 20%. Okay? If that is the case, that means that the change in price is lower than the change in quantity. And if that's the case, we say that demand is elastic. Demand is elastic when the change in quantity is greater than the change in price. Demand elastic, basically it says, you know, elastic means moves a lot. When you are, the more elastic you are, the more you move. And that's what we say about demand. We say there is a change in price. If demand changes a lot, that means it's quite elastic. We say demand is elastic. And that also means that the elasticity is greater than 1. Why greater than 1? Well, because this part, the percentage change in quantity, is bigger than the change in price. Do you agree with me? Yeah. Okay, now what if we have the opposite situation? The change in price is still an increase by 10%, okay? But now the percentage change in quantity is also, it's still a decrease, but a decrease by, let's say, 5%. Then we have that the change in price is bigger than the change in quantity. So we will say that demand is inelastic. And the elasticity will be lower than 1. Okay? So again, here demand inelastic means you increase the price and actually, well, the demand changes, but it doesn't change that much. Can you think of a good where it's true that the price increases and the demand changes, but not that much? Demand is quite inelastic. Can you think of such a good example of good like this? Any idea?
Miss, wouldn't it be petrol or something like that?
Yeah, correct. Petrol is one of them, definitely. You know, oil, we know that petrol is quite inelastic. Quite inelastic, meaning that even if the price increase, yes, we observe a decrease, but not very big. It's quite inelastic. Something, for example, with cigarettes. Okay, when the price of cigarette increases, we do observe a decrease, but the decrease is not really big. The good is quite inelastic. Okay, so those concepts you will see more when you study microeconomics, because we need it a lot in the rest of the study when we start thinking about how will the firm decide how much to produce, at which price, and so on and so forth. Or as I said before, in marketing, because it has a big implication on the type of advertising campaign that you want to do, depending on the type of good and depending on its elasticity. So this term, elasticity, is going to become important to you and you will use it a lot. But before we just finish, I want to give you those 2 extreme cases and make you think of it. Okay, here we have 2 demand curves. It's still, you know, talking about elasticities. We have 2 demand curves. And I'm going to start with the one on the right-hand side. So this one, okay? What would you say of the elasticity of this curve? Again, the elasticity tells you how much does the quantity changes when the price change. So what would you say about the elasticity here? When the price changes and the elasticity, then the quantity changes a lot, we talk about elastic. Demand is elastic, very elastic. When the price changes and the quantity doesn't change, we speak more about inelastic. So what about this? What would you say about this demand? How does it look like? So Marilia, how does it look like?
It's perfectly inelastic.
Okay, perfectly inelastic. How do we see that? Perfectly inelastic. How do we see that? Well, we see that whatever the increase in price, even if you increase the price by 1000%, the quantity is always the same. You always will demand the same level of good. Even if the price not even doubled, but is multiplied by 1000, you will always demand exactly the same quantity of the good. So what kind of good can you think of that could be in this situation? What kind of good could have a perfectly inelastic demand? It's not many goods, but you know, what could you think of? Yanis, for example? Oh.
Sorry, Miss,
Yes?
could you repeat the question? It keeps on like lagging for me.
Okay. We have this graph showing perfectly inelastic demand.
Yeah.
And the question is, what kind of good could be in this situation?
It could be, I mean, is there really a good that can be perfectly inelastic like that?
Yes, yes.
Probably petrol. That's the only other, any
Now,
commodity basically.
Petrol is quite inelastic, and by quite inelastic, you know, if I were to draw it, I'll say demand is quite like this. But still, you know, and we observe it when the price of oil increase, people consume a bit less of it. So it's quite inelastic, but it's not perfectly inelastic. Here we are really saying.
Something to do with medical, maybe, or like, I don't know, maybe pharmaceuticals.
Okay, so you're right. This has to do with being a question of living or dying, basically. Okay, either you get it or you die. Okay, in that case, your demand is perfectly inelastic. So what example? Insulin. Okay, you are diabetic, you need your insulin, you need to get your insulin. If you do not get it, you will die. How much are you willing to pay for it? Whatever the price, you know, it's either that or I die. So I'm perfectly inelastic to the price. What about those goods where it's a question of living or dying? What about the price? What do we know of the price? Go on.
So, because since it's a question of living or dying, wouldn't that mean like no matter the price, you'd probably want to pay for it? Like maybe for medical expenses when you go to the hospital, like let's say if you get into a car crash or something like that and you still need to pay for it.
Yes, I mean, that's what it means. You will be willing to pay for it or you will die. Maybe you don't have the money and then you die. But then what about those goods? You know, those goods like those type of drugs and, you know, like insulin is one example. What about those, you know, what about those prices? What do you know of those goods prices? Are they that high, you know? How come they're that high? Any idea? Anyone? Lion, you have an idea?
Yeah, I think for most of those products, the price is pretty much determined by how much the production just costs, because most companies would consider it immoral to make them super expensive just because people rely with their lives on them. So that's probably.
Well, it's not exactly true. And there are cases, and recently in the US, where companies, they are very much willing to put a very high price, and that has been actually a scandal. So if it's not the company, what happened to those goods? Nor, you have an idea?
Well, I think it's an example of market failure where like people like use the fact that it's a necessity to price it really highly because they know that people will keep like consuming it no matter like how expensive it is. And that's like, as you said, it's what's happening in the US with like medicines as a whole, because like there's no.
So how do we avoid? I mean, you're right. It's probably here. It's one reason, one situation of market failure. So then what happened? What happened to avoid that? You know, still, you know, most of the people that have diabetes, they manage to buy their insulin, and the insulin price is not that high. Why?
I mean, I think you need government intervention, obviously.
You need government intervention. Okay. Many of those goods, they are price regulated. And why are they price regulated? Because demand is perfectly inelastic. Okay, so now you see my point here is to show you that now that we know exactly the term and what do they correspond to, we understand better why for this type of good we need government intervention. We do need government intervention to fix the price, to regulate the price. I mean, government or some kind of independent authority, doesn't matter, but we need some regulator to regulate the price of those goods that are perfectly inelastic. Why? Because otherwise, company, they will be able to put whatever price they want, and some people might die, or you accept that people die, but that's another story. Okay, so here we have the economic concept, and we understand better how it relates to real life situations. Okay, let's move on to the graph on the left-hand side. We have another demand curve. This one is more complicated. So what would you say about this demand curve, about the elasticity on this demand curve? So here, you know, it's more like, yeah, Yanis?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, sure. Okay. So I'd say it's pretty elastic since wait 1 second. Let me just reread this. Yeah, wouldn't it be elastic? But then I'm saying that the price isn't really changing. It's in one place.
Okay, the price stayed the same. Okay, but if the price was to change, okay, let's say the price is here, and let's say the price increases. If the price increases, what happened? What's the demand?
I'm kind of stuck, to be honest.
Okay, no problem. If the price is here, what's the demand?
Would the demand raise as well? Right. I'm not sure.
Well, look at it. No, but that's okay. Don't worry. This one is difficult. You know, it's the most difficult part of this lecture, and that leads us to other concepts that we study in the course and so on. So Tobias, what do you think? If the price were to go that high, what will be the demand?
Yeah, it would decrease.
Okay, so let's start it again. If the price is here, what's the demand? It will be anywhere on the demand curve. We don't know exactly how much quantity. You know, at this price, it could be here, but it could be here.
Yeah, the quantity increases, but here the price
at this
decreases
price,
a little bit.
When the price is here, it could be whatever demand. But when the price is here, let's call it P prime. If the price is here, what's the demand?
Zero.
Zero. Exactly. If the price go above this, demand is zero. At this price, there is lots of demand. Any price above, demand is zero. So this is the extreme case where any increase in price will lead to full drop of demand. So we will say that it's perfectly elastic, completely elastic, perfectly elastic, meaning that any small change in price, no more demand, perfectly elastic. What kind of goods? Okay, and here you have to put yourself in the shoes of a producer. What kind of good could be such that if you increase a little bit the price of your good, you will lose all the demand? Any idea on that? So you change a little bit the price of your good, you are the producers, you put yourself in the shoe of the producer, you increase the price of the good a little bit, you lose all the demand. For which kind of good could this be true? So any idea? Lion?
I think it couldn't be for substitute goods, because even with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, even if Coca-Cola raised the price by a little bit, still some people would prefer the brand and therefore not like all go over to Pepsi. But I don't know, maybe it's a weird example, but for example, if you were selling, I don't know, 10 euro bills and you increased, you were like giving them to people, but you could exchange them 10 euros for 10 euros. But as soon as you requested 10 euros in one, nobody would be taken from you anymore.
Okay, that's a complicated example, but it's a correct example. Let me take an easier one, staying with goods. I agree with you. What you said about Coke and Pepsi will not work because still, you know, you lose some of the consumers, but not all of them. Now I got in the chat, Amanda said goods with lots of competition. Correct. I got from Jacob gold. Yes, perfectly competitive market. Perfect. Okay, so you got the point. So let me explain. Indeed, if you have lots of competition, and if the good is, we say it's perfect substitute, so we say the good is homogeneous, then if you are a consumer, do you care who you buy it from? Gold is a good example. You want to buy gold, okay? Do you care if you buy it from that guy or that guy? I'm talking about the exact same quality of gold. Do you care who you buy it from? No, it's exactly the same good. So you don't care who you buy it from. So if one of the two sellers sells it at a higher price, are you going to go to that person? No, you will just go to the one that sells it at the lower price. Okay, so this is the case. The case of this perfectly elastic demand is the case of goods that are perfect substitutes, that you do not care as a consumer, you do not care who you buy it from. You will just buy it from the cheapest price, which means that on the side of the producer, they can only sell it at the same price, because if they were to increase the price, they will lose all the demand. So those goods are perfect substitutes. We also say that they are homogeneous, and those goods that are homogeneous usually are like all the commodities. Okay, so all the commodities, and here gold is one of them, and that could be also steel or iron or and so on and so forth. And actually, if you look at the financial markets, here we'll be talking about all those goods that have only one price on the world markets. You know, there is one price for gold, there is one price for aluminum, there is one price. Look at the financial markets. And those goods are goods for which demand is perfectly elastic. And that leads us to understanding perfectly competitive markets. So that's in the next step. When we study perfectly competitive market, we'll again have to deal with those perfectly elastic demand curves. Okay, but that's for next time, you know, next time in September in your courses of microeconomics. So all those concepts, you will see them again, not in 1 hour, you know, quickly, but just here it was more to give you a flavor. So we take more time, we explain, we do more examples, and then we move on, because all those concepts, they will be also useful to the next step when we start, well, understanding firms in the different markets, whether they're competitive markets, oligopolistic markets, monopolies, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the end for me for the masterclass itself, unless you have one question you want to ask about the class, and then we will move on to more general question about the program if you have any. So any question about microeconomics, because still it's a class, so I will not leave you with doubts. So do you have any question about what we did today that you would like to ask? No? So keep them for September. Or maybe Carlota, yes?
I just have one quick question. So like on one of the slideshows, you put complement goods, and for that you said like an increase in the price of gasoline decreases the demand of cars. But like, for example, here, like in the US, like since there's no public transportation, wouldn't that not really affect it at this point? Because for the demand of cars is so high, because then you can't transport everywhere or anywhere really.
So it's a good point. Let me put the two of your comments together on the slide. Okay, so you said, you know, we're talking about cars and price of gasoline. So I'm saying the price of gasoline increase, so that will reduce the quantity of gasoline being demanded, and therefore as cars and gasoline are complementary good, if the decrease of gasoline, decrease in the quantity of gasoline being consumed, that will also mean decrease in the cars. And you said, well, you know, but in the US, you know, people, there's not so much public transportation, so actually most of people, they will just buy as much as gasoline as before, and they will use as much cars as before. So basically what you're saying, this still will be true, but what you're saying is that this market, this demand is quite inelastic. Okay, maybe not perfectly, it's not going to be perfectly inelastic, because still some people will do that, but you're right that it's not going to look that way. It's not going to be demand that, you know, you have the change in, so it's quite inelastic. So it's putting together those two concepts that we studied today. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Rafael, yes?
Just as a general question, do we have access to the presentation afterwards somehow?
The presentation of today?
Yeah.
I know it's recorded, so I'm pretty sure you'll have access to that. But maybe okay. Sarah will be able to answer better.
Okay, that'd be great.
But yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Let's go back, all of us on the screen. And yeah, it's time for questions more about the program. Any question that you may have that Sarah or I will be able to answer.
And just to answer Rafael's question, yes, absolutely, we will make this available so you can rewatch it, and yeah, and also for some students who may not, you know, couldn't join us today. So for sure.
So any question about getting ready for September? If not, that means we've done a good job, that, you know, you've been answered all the questions that you had already. So will be class on Saturdays. So good question. In the calendar, I don't know whether you got the calendar already, but yes, we put that Saturdays are possible, but you should not have class on Saturdays in most cases, but it might happen. Okay, so we keep it as a possibility. Sometimes we have to catch up on a course. Maybe the professor was sick or there was some issues, so we have to keep it open as a possibility. So it could be the case, but normally you will not have any class schedule on Saturdays. That's true for Paris and in Torino. In London, sometimes there are some language classes on Saturdays. Alina?
Yeah, hi. So in the group chat, people were talking about a maths preparation course, and I wanted to ask when that will happen and where you can sign up for it.
Okay, it will happen over the summer, so very soon, probably beginning of July, mid-July, you will have the possibility to sign up, and then everything takes place online. And it's really to make sure that you put yourself, at the good level to being able to follow the class in September. It's a very good idea. If you do not feel super confident with your math, it's a very good idea to follow it. Yeah. And it will be required for some of you that haven't done maths for a couple of years or 1 year or two. Yeah. Dovan asked, will be, okay, sorry, I missed, I have to reopen the chat for a minute. Will we have things to read, lecture or courses during the summer before classes? There are math, and I think the international relation professors will advise a couple of books that, it's not mandatory, but it's better that you read during the summer, but that's all. For all the other courses, they'll start in September. Rafael, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wondered, especially in current pandemic times, when you become sick, is there any opportunity, like are the lessons broadcasted, or that you can accompany the lectures from at home?
Okay, let's put it that way. If we are hit by a new wave of pandemia, we will broadcast online. We have done it for a couple of years, so that's no issue. Sorry, I have to plug my computer a bit. Okay. But if occasionally you have a flu, or individually you can't make a course, we won't do it. The reason why is that it raises opportunistic behavior from students that we have observed, and we want to avoid that for the peace of everyone. But many of the courses, there is a part of the courses that is, as you know, that it's a flip learning. So some of the content are online already recorded. So you always have access to some material. It's easy to catch up with courses that you miss. Okay. What will we do during the induction days? So that's a good question. It's very important to come to the induction days. It's actually fully mandatory. What will you do? First, there'll be some games to break the ice, to meet with other students from the program. There'll be a day where you meet with all the deans and some of the academics, and you get the rules, and you get your ID, and all these things. There will be a day that is dedicated to sessions and activity on inclusion and diversity. There will be a party. So yes, you have to come. Would you recommend the math course for someone who has had a math complémentaire this year? I will not think it's necessary. If you had a good grade in math complémentaire in the French baccalaureate, I think you have the level. But actually, you can always, when we'll put it online, you can always test yourself. You will be able to test yourself through a quiz, and you will see if you get a good result, then you'll be fine enough. French classes in Paris, they are not mandatory, and so they are not provided, but they exist. So for a very small cost, you will be able to register. And when I say small cost, I think it's like 200 euros for the year or something like that. You will be able to get French classes, but they are not really fully part of the program itself. How many hours of classes per week? Well, I don't know exactly. I think it's, Sarah, do you know? I think it's around 20, between 17, 20, I don't know.
Yes, I think it's around that, so maybe 17 hours of class per week. Now with the flip model, I think it is a few less hours. So, but yes, it's still learning, like not on campus kind of, yes.
But you have to keep in mind that on the top of the classes themselves, there is lots of group work. So lots of group work with fellow students. So actually you spend some time on campus because you have your classes, and then you meet with your group and you work together. So, the full learning experience is not just into the classroom. Gali, you have a question?
Yeah, so I saw that in Paris there was this the student organization, the association, like the organizers were le Bureau des étudiants. And I don't know if there's like the same bureau in Turin where I'll be next year. So I wanted to ask.
So not yet, in the sense that most of the associations, the students associations, or the student societies, they were built by the master students on the Paris campus. So they are mainly based on the Paris campus, but that doesn't mean there is none of them on the other campuses. There are some student society in all the campuses, and on the top of that, there'll be less, but there are some. And on the top of that, and this started this year, some group of students from the bachelor created the Bachelor Bureau des Études. And the Bachelor Bureau des Études, if you are interested, you could be involved and help actually growing it up in all the campuses, because it started this year. So it's quite new, and needs more involvement from all the new students. So there's things to do, for sure. Would you recommend the math course if you had a IB, if you did an IB math? So I will say same thing as for complementary math in French baccalaureate. Test the exam. I mean the quiz. There is a quiz that is available. If you succeed well, you will see the type of things that you are supposed to know. And if you feel confident, you don't need it. If you feel that the training will be good, just take the class. Okay. It's not mandatory. For some of you, it will be mandatory because you have not done math at all. But for the other, it's not necessarily mandatory, but it's something to do if you do not feel fully confident with your math. Raphael?
I'm just asking because we have a different system in Germany. I took a look at the academic calendar for the year, and I saw that we have these midterms exams, and I wondered, are you examined in all the different subjects in these midterms, or just differing from the final exams and midterms? So how's the system built up?
There are midterms in most of the courses, but not all of them, but it depends on the field. But most of the courses, especially in B1, not necessarily in B2 and even less in B3, but in B1, I think most of the courses, they have midterms. Usually, the assessment for a course is the final exam. It's at least like 50% of the grade. And then the rest is a continuous component that has to do with midterms, presentations, sometimes activities, different things, exercises, different things that you will do during the semester. And the midterm, we have it, like, for example, I have it in microeconomics. It's also for you to get ready for the final. It's really a good way to learn how to take this kind of exams.
Okay,
yes.
So if we get this right, it's not that the content is split up between the two times of exams.
No, it's not. No. It's
so the final exams, you have the content of the midterms again.
Exactly. The finals are cumulatives. Okay. The finals are cumulatives. Correct. Where do we find the math quiz? You will get information about math. I mean, I think there is lots of information about math, but you will get them all. I mean, very soon, beginning of July, you get all the information. Check your emails. Okay, that's the most important thing. That's the big difficulties that we have, guys, is that very often you don't check emails. So check your emails. We give you lots of information all over the summer as well. Okay, and I'm mentioning it as well for the induction week. I'm mentioning it now because I was working on it today. For those of you that won't be 18 years old, you will have to ask your parents to sign some kind of authorization for you to go to the induction weeks, to go to the parties, those kind of things. So same thing, check your email, make sure you get all the information. Make sure you have all your papers being like settled. For your first days at school, because otherwise it's always an issue. You don't have what you miss some papers, you can't do the activity, and so on and so forth. Check your emails. But on the math side, you will have information very soon. Anything else? When do you recommend moving to Paris, and what type of accommodation are most happy with normally? Well, when moving to Paris, it's recommended. Depends on you. If you want to spend August in Paris, August is nice in Paris. There is no French basically. So it's Paris is very empty, and you have Paris for yourself. So it's nice to be there in August. But I mean, yeah, move few days at least before the beginning of the induction week, which in Paris is the 29th. I think the week starts the 29th. So if you can move few days before, like this, you get used to being here. What kind of accommodation? In the, Paris is expensive, London is expensive. In Torino, it's easier. You can have big apartment, you know, and enjoy the city. In Paris and London, usually students will go for small flats. Sometimes they share. Yeah, it works. It gets easier second and third year because you know the other students, you friends, and you rent apartment together. But some students do it from the first year. As you said, we will have not have courses during the summer, but is there somewhere we can find the structure precise program of courses during the summer? You mean like yeah, the courses and the syllabi? I don't think you get the syllabi before the start of September, so I don't think it's planned. You know the different courses that you will be taking, but you know, for me, the summer is important to make sure you have the level in math. That's very important because, you know, you need the level in math. There is a math course, there is a stat course. We use it in microeconomics. So make sure you have your level in math. That's the first thing. Some reading in international relation. I think it's fine. You know, enjoy your summer and then work hard in September and make sure you're ready for September. That's more important. And then you'll have plenty of time to get into your study. How are the exams structured? Do you have to pass every exam? Yeah, you have to pass every exams. Okay, it's not like an average between the different exams. Every module have to be passed. Okay, and usually to pass a course, you have to have more than 10 over all the grades of the course, meaning the continuous grade and the final exam, and you need to have more than 8 out of 20 on the final exam. And if you don't pass, then you will go to receipts and you'll have another chance to pass it. Can you choose the topic of the bachelor thesis yourself? Yes, definitely. You choose the bachelor thesis yourself, your topic, and then you choose also your tutor. And yeah, and so you can work on basically whatever you want, as long as it has something to do with management and business and liberal arts, you know, that is not completely off anything we do. Did I miss something? Not. Okay, anything else? What kind of industry do you recommend for an internship in the first year? In the first year, the internship is not mandatory. It's mandatory in second and third year. The reason being that it's more difficult to find internship in the first year. You have less experience, but it's always good. I mean, you know, if you want to have some kind of experience in working before, before the second year, in your first year, pick any industry you're interested in. That's what I will say. You know, it's like if it's your first job in experience, just choose whatever you want. Do, you know, what kind of industry you have to test. You know, it's a good bachelor is a good opportunity to test sectors. So test the sector that you're interested in, observe, participate, learn, you know, and then move on to the next year. You choose another industry if you didn't like the first one, or you may continue. You know, this is, I have no recommendation except you're young. You have, you know, all your career in the future, coming in the future before you. So make experiences. Is it possible to do internship in a country outside? Yeah, sure. You can do internship anywhere you want. Any other question? You will find an internship. I mean, I understand this is a concern. You know, what happens if you do not find an internship? At the end, you know, I don't see any of our students that didn't find an internship. You know, either you find an internship in a private company, you can also do at least some part of your 20 weeks of internship in social, you know, NGOs or for social reasons. And sometimes if you have a project, we have some students, they're already thinking about creating their own companies and so on. And sometimes we can accept projects that are linked with your own entrepreneurial companies. Okay, so, but and also, I mean, you look by yourself. There is also a career service that helps you find internships. I mean, we don't have cases of students that do not find internship at all. We had some cases where it was difficult for students to find, especially during the COVID year. You know, 2020 was tough, but maybe they could not reach the 20 weeks. Maybe they will do only 16 or 15, but no cases where students will not find any internships. That didn't happen. Yes, any other question? No? There's student exchange possibility on top of the program. There are some, yes, in the third year. There are some. Not many of our students are interested because, well, obviously you're already moving 3 different campuses, but that's already quite some exchange around different countries and campuses. But we have some exchange agreements with, we have some with university in China, although, you know, these years have been stopped by the sanitary, by the COVID situations. We have some with university in Canada and in India. I mean, and we are building new partnerships. So yes, it's possible. Anything else? Well, anyway, you know, all the team is always here to answer your questions. So if you have other question that comes to you afterward, I'm sure Sarah and Agustin and all the team, they are always with you to answer your questions. It depends what you mean by partner. We don't partner in the sense that we don't have exchange program at this point, but we have some connection, meaning some fast track in terms of finding masters. And what does that mean, fast track? Fast track means that you do not have exactly the same deadline as other students for certain university. They know us, basically. No, it's possible to do a semester abroad within the bachelor in the third year, not necessarily in master. Tobias, yes?
Yes, is it mandatory to be present at the uni every day, like in school? Every class, every day?
Absolutely. It's absolutely mandatory to be present in all your courses.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have to say that I and all the professors enjoy very much when the students are actually showing up in class and that we can have, you know, real class with full interaction and so on. We have been missing it a lot during those COVID years, and actually the students as well, and probably yourself as well in your different countries and high schools. But the feedbacks that we had from students this year is that, you know, they were very happy to come back to school. And some of them, of course, will sometimes miss the class and would like to avoid that as much as possible. Also because, again, group work, interaction, you know, campus life and learning is much more efficient when the students are in class. So yes, it's mandatory. Is there a library or study room in the Turin campus? I believe yes, study rooms for sure. Library, access to the library, I mean, the library is mainly online, so of course you have access to all the library in terms of getting the access to journals and resources, and there is definitely study rooms, places where you can meet and study together. Yeah. Where should I send my IELTS results? Or maybe Sarah will tell you that.
Yes, so you can send it to your admissions team. Don't know who managed your application. If it's us in London, it's going to be Seb, my colleague Seb McGaver. But yeah, you have to send it to your admissions contact.
Is it easy to do a semester abroad at the MIT? No, it's not easy. It's not a partner in exchange program. I mean, to being able to do a semester in another university, they have to have a specific exchange agreement with us, and we don't have exchange agreements with MIT at the bachelor level. So no, it's not possible. Maybe in the future, but not for now. Are you able to get a scholarship loan in France if you already are getting it? Country you're from? It's a good question. Sarah, maybe?
Question. I can definitely we can check with our colleagues in Paris. They will know more about it. But what I can think off top of my head is a loan. You can have a really good student loan with BNP Paribas. The condition is that you need to have one guarantor in France, someone who lives there. And I cannot see why that's not a possibility, because it's a loan. Depending on the quantity you want to get from the bank. Maybe if you get a scholarship from your country, then you get a smaller loan. So that can be kind of a matching, kind of situation with a scholarship from your country and so on. There is also other different loans available. So we can definitely send that to you. There is Brain Capital, and there is also fins for European students. So yeah, there's different types of loans that you can get as a student that can kind of complement maybe your own scholarships.
One thing, I see, Alina, you sent a link to international partners. Careful, maybe this link, and I'm not sure because I haven't checked, is for the school and more for the masters. Okay, so it doesn't mean that those partners will definitely be partners with the bachelor program. So do not get mistaken. And the question was, can we find the exchange agreement somewhere online? Okay, you can filter. Okay, so perfect. Thank you, Alina. I haven't used it, so that's useful. I will not anyway. I mean, it's a good idea to look, but those things are changing. You're entering B1. We are in the process of signing new agreement every year. So by the time you get to B3, anyway, there will not be any exchange partnership in B1 and B2. By the time you get to the end of B2, we may have new partnerships with other schools. So that's a good question, but keep it in mind and ask it again, 1.5 years from now. All right, I will have to leave you. So maybe, I don't know whether the session is finished and Sarah stays with you, or I don't know that, but I myself have to leave because I have another meeting. But I'll be very happy to see you all at some point during your journey, at some point in one of your campuses, and for sure, all the one that comes to Paris in September. I'll see you in September. Thank you all. À bientôt. Bye. Have a good summer.